What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra. Following the Jets game, which was disappointing even more so than the Giants game. I guess the city of New York has some significant beef with this, the city of Green Bay. But joining me this week for another post-game pod is Ty Windish. Ty, how are you doing?
I'm well, but only because we are like 4 or 5 days away from Milwaukee Bucks regular season action starting. The Packers and lack of Brewers postseason ball has me significantly less well. And, this game, I think it's fair for any Packer backers to be pretty unwell after watching this. But how are you doing, Numac?
I'm down bad. We'll say to put it bluntly. This game was horrendous to watch. The first half was nothing short of just two teams vomiting all over themselves. And then one team decided to pick it up at halftime, and the other decided to not, that being the Packers. Packers end up losing 27-10, but before we get into that, a couple things to promote. Thursday, Buck season starts. Ty and Rohan getting back at it. If you're listening to this on Monday, new feed or new pod in the feed regarding Ty. What are you guys talking about this week?
Not just them.
Oh,
Actually,
that's right. That's the
we have a 3-part Eurostep Podcast Network Bucks coverage season preview. So on I think Friday of last week, the West Over Unders pod dropped on Monday morning. So when you're listening to this, it is live. The East non-Bucks Over Unders preview drops. And then the four of us are getting together for Wednesday to do a strictly Bucks preview pod, and we'll share our takes on their over/under. Pat Connaughton's injury, maybe that changes the line. Only 3 weeks. We'll see. The
right.
wing depth is suspect, but we will get to that on the Eurostep Podcast Network Milwaukee Bucks feed. So check that out if you're not already.
Absolutely.
But as much as I would love Numac to talk about the Bucks some more, we should probably get back to the pack. And there was a great cruising for a bruising post-mortem pod, some good make time for this. I believe we're going to do the Bear pod together,
Mhm.
talking about the Hulu series The Bear, which I don't know, is the Bear more or less stressful than watching the Packers on any given Sunday? I'm
Man,
not
it's
sure.
close. Man, it's
I'm not
close.
sure. Rodgers looked to be having some Carmy meltdowns on during the game at a couple different points. But as much as I would love to keep talking about everything else we're doing at GSPN, maybe except for the Brewers, we should dive in here. Where do you want to start this 27-10? I know you just said the Jets game. I know
Yeah.
people know, but they do lose 27-10
Yeah.
in Lambeau Field. Where should we start?
They lost at Lambeau Field and not London, so there's no excuses this week for the whatever we just watched. Yeah, as I
Yeah.
mentioned, the first half was insufferable. The
It was TNF. It was somebody
yeah,
told these two teams that noon on Sunday is the new Thursday night because 6 total points. That was TNF football we saw.
through the first like however I guess 10 drives, there were 9 punts and a missed field goal. And then it went fumble, field goal, downs, missed field goal, field goal. Like it was just awful, awful football. But as you mentioned, it was 3-3 going into the half. The Packers weren't out of this game. And then starting in the second half, they just decided to not be good anymore. Like the defense started letting up more yards, rushing and not being so disciplined that way. Ended up getting outscored in the second half, 24-7. That's not good. One of those was a blocked punt for a touchdown, but even then, you're allowing the Jets to score two touchdowns and then put a big drive together at the end of the game to kick a field goal and seal it. Like it was whatever halftime speech Matt Lafleur and company gave to the Packers must have rivaled that the sideline speech he gave to the offense because he gave that at 0-0 and they scored 10 more points. So I don't know what sort of feeble, weak, not good uh, speech was given at halftime by Matt Lafleur and Joe Barry and the company, but it wasn't good. They didn't change anything.
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of Aaron Rodgers conversations, and we're going to have another one. But should we talk about the defense first? Because I do think just because the offense is going to be this prolonged
Yeah,
conversation, I almost want to get to the defense first before we just get totally kind of
Wrapped up.
unraveled.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do the whole Lafleur and Rodgers and everything else thing.
Right.
Honestly, I'm so torn on this defense. So first half, incredible. I mean, you hold a team to 3 points when your offense does nothing
Mm-hmm.
for a full half. And again,
Yeah.
the offense's one scoring drive didn't impact the defense at all because it was the end of the half. So the offense doesn't move the ball at all. The defense holds the Jets to 3 points. It's great. They press the receivers, which is what we wanted.
Yeah.
It worked really well.
Man, that man defense worked well.
Jair looked great. Adrian Amos really made plays all over the place.
Yep.
Really early, Dean Lowry made some plays, not so much after that. But I want to ask you, I think the biggest question I have about this defense is not like, should they keep doing that? I think obviously, yes. It seemed clear to
Yeah.
me that their playmakers were able to make plays because they were playing up.
Mm-hmm.
But do we think that they are just running out of gas at the end of games because they have to be on the field so much because the offense can't stay out there? Or are there bigger problems? Because I do feel like this is now 2 weeks in a row where, let's say mid offenses, the Giants and the Jets now. I mean, these are teams that are
Right.
winning games. They're not awful, but not great. They're not the Bills, right?
Right.
Why are these teams having so much success late in games? Like, can we just chalk it up to fatigue, which is what I think Adam and I did last week after
Yeah.
the London game? Or is there a deeper problem here? I mean, we've know Joe Barry's defense not been perfect, but what is going on late in games to where it goes from a 3 point first half to a 24 point second half against the Jets at home?
I really think it plays a lot into what you guys are talking about, in that it is them getting worn out because they're on the field so much. Because if you're not putting long, sustained drives together, you're, to steal an adage from Mark Antanasio and David Stearns, you're giving the other team's opposing offenses more bites at the apple to figure out an offensive scheme that's working. Like, if you are just giving the opposing offense more plays, eventually something's going to work, right? Like, you very rarely do you see just a full offensive game not work, like you're seeing the Packers doing the last few weeks. Like, that's not normal across the NFL. So if you're basically just you're wearing down the defense, like the Packers defense, by keeping them out there so long because the offense can't sustain anything. But also, when teams are seeing pretty much every look you can give a team, because you can only game plan for so much during a week, they're eventually just going to start figuring out what they need to do to beat you. And it's then compounded by the fact that early in games, when it's tied and when you're not down by a lot, you can pass the ball, run the ball kind of equally. But then once they are getting a lead, once opposing offenses are getting a lead, they can just start running the ball, which the Packers aren't good at defending anyways. And so the Packers' biggest flaw in their run defense gets compounded by the fact that they can't stop, they can't get off the field in the first place. Let me back up. They can get off the field because they're forcing turnovers and turnovers on downs and such, but they're out there
They're
so
not they're
often.
not forcing turnovers. I think that is
I'm
probably their
right.
biggest issue.
Agreed. Forcing punts is what I meant to
Yeah,
say.
they're. I
So
think. Go ahead.
they can get off the field. They're just
Yep.
on the field so often that they get worn out.
Yes. Yes. It feels to me like I thought the secondary had a great game, and you look
Hmm.
at Zach. Do you know how bad it feels to lose to a team that is 110? And that's not counting the sacks. It's 99 if you factor in the 2 sacks. But like either 99 or 110 passing yards in 2022. And it
Hmm.
rained for a little bit, but this was not a flood game. Like there was no
No.
reason. The secondary just did a great job against the Jets receivers, but 2 sacks. And one of them was just Zach Wilson stinks, man.
Yeah.
The broadcast at one point was like, this guy's learning from Aaron Rodgers. The stats aren't great, but he is leading them. No, he's not. He stinks. He was terrible in this game. One of the sacks
Yeah.
was Zach Wilson's terrible pocket presence, which was on display the whole game.
Hmm.
Basically, just wanders into Rashawn Gary after he gets pushed outside. And that was one of the 2 sacks for the Packers. But 2 sacks, no turnovers. The Packers lose the turnover battle 1-0. I said it like I think like 3 different Jets drives. It's time for the Packers defense to force a turnover. They have not done it enough all year. If I had to guess, they've got to be near the bottom
I
in
can
the
think of like
league.
one, or like the fumble in Tampa is the only one I can really think of.
I think there was a pick, maybe 2
Oh
against
yeah.
Justin Fields.
Yeah, they had two against Justin Fields, I
Like
remember.
late in game kind of heave stuff has
Yep.
been a significant percentage of their forced turnovers. They're even when like they can't get off the field except for forcing three and outs or forcing, stopping on third downs. They can never end a drive early. And I think that factors into I think blaming the offense for the defense is somewhat true, but I also think
hmm
they never cut off drives early. Like they do
hmm
it the hard way every single time instead of forcing a fumble or picking off a pass or whatever else it is.
Right.
And it just really has hurt them. And it did in this game too, where the Jets are winning the field position battle. And even when they're not, when they get a punt blocked, the offense still isn't able to capitalize in the first half, which I think was a pretty big swing moment in this game. The two blocked punts, I think both swung the game in different ways. The Packers, or maybe one was a field goal, but the Packers not able to score when they get a block on special teams. The Jets
Right.
return theirs for a touchdown. I mean, that's a 10-ish point swing right there in a 17-point game.
Right.
But the defense just I think they play very soundly. There just has not in this game especially not enough impact plays.
No.
Two total sacks, no turnovers. They were good, but they couldn't swing the game. And maybe that's
No.
just unrealistic to expect, but they didn't do it. They didn't look like a great defense, I think. In the first half they did,
Right.
but overall they're just like they're a solid to good defense because they don't make enough of the big splash plays that swing games.
Right. I'm looking at their their turnover stats right now. They have one interception. That was the Jair Alexander one where he dove in front of it at the end of the game. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it's four forced fumbles or four fumble recoveries. One by Isaiah McDuffie, one by Darnell Savage, Jaron Reed, and Rashawn Gary. So it's not too many. Like that's definitely not going to be up in the higher percentages of the league, and it
I mean,
shows
one pick through 6 games
with as
is
good as that's probably more scheme than it is like
maybe
talent.
a little bit too of they have forced teams that either have no quarterback or no pass catchers, Tampa, so teams just haven't thrown as much.
Right. Why would you throw the ball and force it or like run the risk of throwing an interception when the rushing game does so well? Like
That yeah, yeah,
they're
100%.
they're just like, oh, if we don't have a good quarterback, Billy Zappi, Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, why not just run the ball when we have uh I'm not gonna Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson are good. They're not great, but then Saquon Barkley and now the running back duo of Breece Hall and Michael Carter. Like it's this doesn't make sense. Like why would you put the game in your offensive's I guess least talented person's hands than just run the ball and gash up
So
the defense. That was what we saw
it's,
today,
it's a pretty good question for Green Bay too, isn't
isn't it?
it?
Weird how that
But
works.
first, but first, any more? I don't want to go over there too quickly because again, I worry that we'll do offense for 50 minutes and then just do
Yeah.
defense. So, what were your other takes about or your thoughts about Green Bay's defense in this game?
That's the same as it's been all season. Pass defense good, run defense bad. The uh they put the stat up there to begin or like the graphic up there to begin the game. Packers have the fifth best defense in the NFL, second in pass defense, 21st in rush defense, and it shows its colors again today. Like I don't know what the D line's doing to allow some of these up the gut runs, and then uh, like the linebackers can't stop outside runs, but it's obvious the game plan against the Packers is to run the ball and then take shots downfield when they can't stop the run. It happened once this game, mostly because Zach Wilson didn't play that well, but Eric Stokes got beat on the double move from Corey Davis for a 40-yard completion. I think it was on the second to last touchdown drive for the Jets, and that's just like those are going to happen sometimes. Like you can't be upset for Eric Stokes letting that up, but that's the longest reception they had of the day. They had 10 total receptions, two of them by Corey Davis. Other than that, the longs were 14 from CJ Uzama and 16 yards from Tyler Conklin. Like they held the passing game in check, partially because they put in a lesser quarterback again. But then they just hand the ball off, and the entire defense breaks down. On the Breece Hall touchdown run, Greg Olson pointed out on the broadcast, Quay Walker overcommitted to setting the edge when he was supposed to fill a gap, and Breece Hall ran right where Quay Walker had vacated. Like that's just he's a rookie. We don't want to rag on Quay Walker. We've been high on him so far this season because he's been sort of flying around the ball, been a high impact player. But those are the rookie mistakes we're kind of seeing, and those rookie mistakes were rearing their head at a bad time.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the Jets, Brees Hall and Michael Carter combined are averaging about pretty much 6 flat yards per carry.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Wilson averaged 6.1 yards per attempt. So, like, their rushing game was basically as effective. And again,
Right.
like a third of his yard, more than a third of his yards do come on the one play to Corey Davis, which underthrown ball that Stokes kind of just loses in air after he earlier lost Corey Davis,
Right.
and Davis comes back and make the catch. You take that out though, their longest completion outside of that was 16 yards to Tyler Conklin, and that was 41 of the 110 passing yards. Like that, literally nothing over 20 yards in the passing game
Right.
besides that one. Of course, you look at New York's rushing stats, three different guys have runs of 20 or more yards, including a Braxton Berrios touchdown. And it feels like all year this has been kind of a problem. And certainly in this game, anything that's funky, like the Braxton Berrios touchdown was kind of like a fake misdirection, then Berrios is going the other way. And the Packers defense, it feels like if they lose a guy or on the line, he's just gone.
Yep.
And that's a little bit of a secondary thing, but really I just thought the linebackers, I don't really remember a play the linebackers made in this play. Like I remember early a couple from Dean Lowry. Don't really remember anything Kenny Clark did, to be honest with
Didn't
you.
hear
And I
didn't hear
think
his name called.
I think he is kind of the issue for the middle of the line in the rush defense. Like that's the guy I think you need to do better. I
Yeah.
don't think he's done enough in rush or pass, but certainly in rush. But like, Devondre Campbell ends up, I think, with 8 tackles,
Yep.
four
Looking at
solo.
looking at now.
But I don't remember one of those that was, oh, that was a great tackle to stop a rush
Yeah.
early. It's
No.
like, okay, tackled someone 7 yards down the field. It's not that helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Just felt like that early to middle part of the field was way too soft for Green Bay and too late to some of these rushing plays.
Right. In general, the pass rush wasn't there too much anyways. Like he only had 18 like true dropbacks, like pass attempts essentially. But looking at the ESPN box score, only 2 sacks, and that was really all the QB hits they had were the 2 sacks. So it's tough when you're not getting a chance to tee off on a quarterback that's not throwing a lot, but you still like if it's a quarterback of Zach Wilson's caliber, at least try and make it difficult on some of his throws, which maybe they did. I don't know. It's not encouraging to say the least. But at the same time, the run defense just needs to get better. And Dean Lowry, Kenny Clark, the biggest example, and Jeremy just need to be better at stopping this run and plugging holes where they need to be because they just keep getting gashed. And it's inside and outside. It's a front seven issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in this game, they weren't good enough against either. And as you said, there
Yeah.
just wasn't that many pass sets. But the 2 sacks were the one I mentioned earlier, where Rashawn Gary kind of just finds Zach Wilson.
Yep.
And then Kingsley Ngabare, hopefully I pronounced that
Yep.
correctly, on a DB blitz where they just kind of overwhelmed
Yep.
the Jets offensive line. But it wasn't like guys weren't beating the offensive linemen and getting home. It
Right.
was a schemed up, DB back or DB blitz and just the junk Rashawn Gary one where sack probably should have gone to. I think it was Reed who was kind of forcing him out of the
Yep.
pocket, but it's one of those where Rashawn Gary gets the full sack, but it was just there for him. It wasn't like the defensive lineman though. Again, I think Dean Lowry made like 2 plays early on where I was like, oh, is this going to be the Dean Lowry game? Didn't really hear his name after that. And didn't really hear anyone's name after that. And it's just a problem that the front line that I think we didn't look at it as a strength of this Packers defense. Certainly with Jair, Razul Douglas, Adrian Amos, the secondary should be the strength. But we looked at it as a good unit, especially with Kenny Clark there in the middle. Just has not been enough splash plays in this season whatsoever.
No. And you touched on it too. The DB blitzes became a thing. We saw it like 2 or 3 times where they sent a secondary man to blitz the quarterback, and the one time it worked, when they helped get the sack, and the second time was the big breakaway run by Brees Hall, and I think on his touchdown. So at least they're doing them. I can't fault the the result for the process because at least they're making these things prevalent in the game, but maybe do it a little more often just to try and put the pressure on and get Zach Wilson to force a turnover on a bad throw or something.
Yeah, I thought scheme wise, I liked the way the defense played overall. It's
Hmm.
just like, can the front four get some more run stops or just get some more pressure? And it's, you can scheme that by sending help, but you can't totally scheme those guys just playing better. So hopefully, guys like Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, etc., are able to kind of flip a switch here and make
Yeah.
some more plays going forward.
Kenny Clark has 2 sacks in the season. They both came against Tampa, and I don't even remember which ones they were. He's gotten he's not doesn't have a lot of tackles on the season. Doesn't has only has 2 sacks. I feel like he just needs to be better.
Does that have his tackles for loss data?
It does. He has 3 tackles for loss in the season. Two were the sacks that he gave up in Tampa, and one against Minnesota in Green Bay in week 1. Otherwise, zero last week, zero against the Patriots. And then today, I don't think he had one. Um, Kenny Clark had 3 tackles
Oh,
today,
yeah, he
none.
had three tackles, none for loss. I was
Yeah,
looking up, so prior to this game, we won't know that until later this week, the
yeah.
next episode of Talk of the Tundra. But Kenny Clark was the 18th overall rated interior defensive lineman as per PFF,
Hmm.
really bolstered by his 87.5 pass rushing grade. So he must be racking up some pressures at least prior to this week, but he is coming in sub 60 on run defense grade, which they don't renumber, but you have to scroll down the list, and I think that's outside the top 50
Yeah,
of interior defensive linemen for rush defense, which I think that checks out. Or he's actually no, they don't number it, but he is last when you sort by rows of 50. So he is the 50th rank interior defensive lineman in rush defense prior to this game, and I would not anticipate that going up because again, not a game where anyone on the Packers run defense looked good.
right,
So I think that checks out. Even if the sacks aren't there, it wouldn't surprise me if he was responsible for generating more pressure prior to this week. But the run defense is an issue, and he has not done a lot to help that.
right. That's pretty much all there is to it. So, should we hop into the offense and start getting mad?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Before we get mad, let's start with something a little nice. Bobby Tunyon, really good game
Yeah.
today. Seems like he's back.
He moved well. Clearly, Rodgers really trusts him, which we know is important. 12 targets, which led the team, 10 receptions, which also led the team. And one of the two target non receptions was a clutch drop because it would have led to a pick six. I guess it wouldn't have been a catch either way, but
Yeah,
it was good that he didn't get his hand under it in the first drive of the game.
yeah.
But yeah,
So,
I think he moves well for a tight end. He's got dependable hands. I didn't think either of the two non completions to him were necessarily his fault.
hmm
It's good to see. He is like, if he just keeps playing like this and they can either get Dobbs developed or get Watkins back, I think he is looking like a very solid third/fourth, maybe even fifth if you count the running backs option on offense. Just
right.
like that, the safety valve, the classic tight end role of he's underneath, he's getting open, he's moving with Rodgers.
hmm
It's exactly what you want to see. So definitely a good game from Tunyon.
Somebody on Packers Twitter had mentioned it last week, and I forget who it was, but they were saying like some fixes would possibly would include putting Tunyon outside and making either Tyler Davis or uh, DeGuara the true like tight end at the end of the line blocking and things like that, and making Tunyon a wide receiver tight end rather than a tight end wide receiver, if that makes sense. And so it worked this week. Like clearly, when Rodgers targets Tunyon, he's going to catch the ball. Like 10 of 12 was pretty darn good for 90 yards. They didn't even get into the red zone at really any opportunity. I don't think they had a snap in the red zone, but I can't confirm that. Um, to really give them a chance to score. Like they took a bunch of deep shots in the end zone, but they never took one to Tunyon. And so I'm glad that they're using him that way. It goes back to the sentiment that I believe Jordan and I talked about on Thursday. is that they have a bunch of talent on this team, which we're going to get into and talk a little bit more about in a minute. But they have a bunch of talent on this team that are having individual really good games, but they're not putting it all together to make a cohesive unit. Like Tunyon this week. Um, I forget who it was last week. I think it was Lazard, or 2 weeks before that might have been Lazard. But they all like Lazard, Aaron Jones, Tunyon, Dobbs, even Rodgers was good like uh against the Bears. Have all had really good games. They just cannot put it all together for some reason, and it's part of the reason that they can't get anything going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time now. And I thought Lazard was pretty good in this game. I mean, just a lot of contested catches, and I mean, Sauce Gardner is that guy, and he was
Mhm.
on Lazard for pretty much all. He was
Mhm.
knocked out of the game for a little bit. Thankfully, was able to get back healthy and play again by the end of the game. But he's that dude, and he was all over Lazard in this game. Still came down with 4 catches for 76 yards and a beautiful touchdown. But I think the issue you're talking about, we need to have a Matt Lafleur conversation because
Yep.
Adam and I post Giants game talked about, is it Rodgers at the line or is it Lafleur's play calling, the reason that Aaron Jones never gets the ball, which again, we've talked about in every Packers game this season. We've got to talk about it again in this game.
Mhm.
And Aaron Jones did look shaken up at some point. I do wonder if he's dealing with some sort of a recurring injury, to be quite honest, because
Yeah.
no other explanation really makes any sense for the touch distribution at this point. But I just think the play calling has just been so uneven and somewhat nonsensical.
Mhm.
They'll start moving the ball on the ground and then pass, pass, pass. And it just feels like the looks that we're looking for. Funny enough, Amari Rogers was the player who caught the ball in question. He had a nice receiver snap and then didn't do anything else as a receiver in the game. But it was a play action, like middle of the field, probably, I don't know, 11 to 14-ish yards downfield. It ended up being a 14-yard catch, so right around there,
Right.
just like slant up the middle of the field. So it wasn't in the backfield or, at the line of scrimmage, and it wasn't 30 yards deep. It was that middle of the field using the threat of the run game, and it looked great. And it just feels like the Packers do so little of that. They
Mhm.
don't run the ball enough in general.
I
The
go
the
ahead.
love for Dylan over Jones. I mean, Dylan
In
played
this
better in
game.
this
In
game.
this game, yeah.
I think it's been kind of there's been times where Dylan just gets more carries even earlier in the game. And I like AJ Dillon. Something against him. He had a pretty bad game, 2 drops and a tough fumble in this one, but he did have 4.1 yards per carry versus Jones 2.1. The Jets defensive line and the Packers offensive line were really working against him.
Right.
But it's just so many bizarre things happening in terms of where the ball is going, the routes that are being run, who is getting the ball, how little they're handing it off, and which back is getting it. Things just aren't adding up. And at a certain point, you can say, Rodgers is doing the least optimal things at the line, but he's not the one lining them up and saying who should be
No.
out there and what plays should be run. I just don't think Matt LaFleur has been very good this year with the offense. And I think his brother was better than him today. And it's why the Packers dropped their second game in a row to New York teams that they were heavily favored against.
Mhm. And it doesn't make like sort of any sense to me that like this is just what we predicted coming in the season that LaFleur has wanted a run first offense, right? Well, at least that's what we thought. That's what we thought how this was going to go, given sort of the team build, right? And now it's just not happening. They have the tools to do it, and it's just not happening. I think it was last week against the Giants, AJ Dillon had his lowest snap count percentage of the game since I think like the end of last year or something. Like it's been going steadily down since week one, and I think it was for sure last week that he had zero targets in the passing game. Like they just didn't utilize AJ Dillon last week. And now this week they bounce back and they get him involved on 10 rushes and 6 targets in the passing game. So they're incorporating him more, but then they just take out Aaron Jones's legs. Like it's we knew and wanted it to happen this year where we'd use both of them equally and the success would come because they're two different types of backs, right? Well, it's more seemingly the fact that now they're utilizing each back in separate games, rather than using them both to their best of their ability in game and like per game, it's like, okay, AJ, this is your week to go out and do some work. Okay, Aaron, now it's your turn to go out and do some work, and it goes from week to week, and that just isn't how it should be. Aaron Jones is the most talented player on the Green Bay Packers offense, and they're not giving him opportunities to do so. 9 rushes today for 19 yards, 10 rushes for 41 yards for AJ Dillon. Like AJ Dillon had a little bit more success, but it's probably from the fact that they were giving him more chances to running in in a row essentially. There was so many times where we saw just Aaron Jones go away from the offense forever, and we never saw like him get multiple rushing attempts on a drive. Again, they can't sustain drives anyways. Maybe that's part of the reason, but they just keep going away from the run game. Like if AJ Dillon's gonna have 10 rushes for 41 yards, like 4.1 average is not bad, it's not good. But regardless, they just aren't committing to the run game. I want to hear no more talk from LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, any of it about how we need to get the run game more involved, yada yada yada. It's all smoke and mirrors. They're not committed to getting the run game going. They threw it 45 times this game, counting Jordan Love's 4 throws at the end of the game, to 20 rushes, one of them being from Aaron Rodgers in this game. They more than doubled their passing attempts on instead of the rushing attempts. And it's not like they played down the whole game. They were tied 3-3 at halftime. Like it's you can't explain that disparity in one half of football. They did not commit to the run in the first half. Probably why they couldn't get any offense going. AJ Dillon fumbling shouldn't take away from the scheme that you want to get the run game going, but they did. And on like I think it was the first drive, they went halfback dive with AJ Dillon. They got like 2-3 yards and then 2 passes and they punted. Like
Which we've just seen all year. We've seen so many of those possessions where it's like one decent run or, decent to bad run. And it's like, all right, let's just throw it downfield twice. And between Rodgers waning accuracy this season and receivers who just, they're not Devontae Adams. They're
right.
not getting wide open repeatedly, right? Like it
Nope.
is tougher.
We'll get to that. I have some stats on that, but we'll
Yeah,
get to it.
it's just there's just been so many drives like that, and we have Lafleur this week, according to Zach Kruse, sorry, on Aaron Jones getting 3 carries in the first half. Again, a 3-3 first half, not like they were down big. Quote, that's not good enough. Like, yeah, we know. We've known all along. We knew the whole game it wasn't enough. You're the one who has to know that, buddy, and do something about it. Like,
Right.
I just don't understand these quotes that it's like, if only someone could do something. You call the plays. Put the ball in his hands. What do you mean that's not good enough?
Yeah.
It's not like this is a new thing. It's not like this week suddenly, oh wow, Aaron Jones really wasn't involved. Every game this year,
Every game.
outside of the Bears game
Outside
where
of
they
the Bears
won,
game.
we've said, hey, maybe Aaron Jones should get the ball. They're not down 3 scores in the first half.
Nope.
They just don't put together consistent drives. Maybe let's get Aaron Jones the ball. Let's, get him. How about a traditional running back screen? I feel like they really just do not do that very often. They get guys in the flat.
They tried a
I feel like
couple
they
times
get
this
guys
game.
in the flat, but they're not good at screens, which is odd.
Yeah, they tried a couple times this game and they didn't work out. But
Well, maybe because the offensive line was just a whole nother mess we're going to have to talk about.
it is.
But
We're going to talk about it. But it's just like I think you should leave bit, right, of the guy in the hot dog suit saying we're
yeah,
all trying to find the
we're
guy
all
who did
trying to
this.
find the guy who did this.
We're all trying to find the guy who's making sure Aaron Jones isn't running the ball 20, 30 times a game, which like I'm not advocating for 30, that's a lot, but 20 times is probably the amount of times Aaron Jones should be touching the ball.
15. At least 15.
Right. And it's just like, man, like are we really that naive to not understand how football works that maybe that's not the best way to do it? I'd say not, because they're losing games.
Yeah.
And like you thought that I think the London game against the Giants gave them an L. It was like, oh, it's London, rabble, rabble, rabble. That this sucks. Their whole attitude around London sucked, and that's why they probably lost that game. But now, like that's why they wouldn't have a chip on their shoulder coming into this game. They're just pissy about having to travel. But then now you lose at home to a Jets team that I guess might be kind of half good. Like I'm not ready to say that they're going to sit there.
I think they've got a good defense. You know what? You know what's funny about the Jets?
Yep. Go ahead.
They're literally what the Packers should be.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. They're a great defense. I don't know. I'll have to look at the stats to see if they're great. They look like a great defense in this game between Sauce Gardner on your best receiver and Quinnen Williams on the line. But
Right.
they are a strong defensive team with two good running backs, and they move the ball enough. And sometimes it's ugly, but they stay in games and they win.
And that's
And
right. And that's what
that's
the Packers
that's
have been so far this year. But they need to be more than that. They have the talent to be more than that. Like you know what? You might have put it the best way. The Jets are a younger version of the Packers in team build wise. They have two running backs that are very good and that work very well in tandem with each other, Michael Carter, and Breece Hall. Their wide receivers are decent to good, but none of them are all pro. Garrett Wilson is in the Romeo Dobbs role. Jamison Crowder or Corey Davis is in the Alan Lazard role. Elijah Moore is in like the Randall Cobbs or Christian Watson role, the slot receiver guy. Fair enough, like Elijah Moore didn't do anything today, but regardless of the fact. And then they have a quarterback who's not playing to their potential. Like Zach Wilson might stink, but the hope was for him to be a lot better than he was. And Rodgers, we thought was going to keep rolling and having this sort of renaissance late career um, excellence that he's been doing, coming off back-to-back MVP seasons, and it just fell off. Like I refuse to put all of the blame on Devonte Adams leaving. It's just insane to do that. Like Rodgers has been worse. The play calling has been worse. Like it's a whole thing, and they just need to start running the ball more. We're gonna keep saying it and saying it and saying it and saying it until we're blue in the face. They just have to run the ball more.
Yeah, and I think they have to make a change on the offensive line to do that.
Yep.
Clearly, I think Elton Jenkins was not good in this game. However, Royce Newman was abjectly terrible in this
Awful.
game. And I
Awful.
just don't understand that the only fix is like a series in the first half. Of all people, Jake Hansen comes in.
Right.
It's just bizarre. We've seen Zach Tom, was it PFF, who said he's one of the best offensive players we saw in the preseason. Just great. And I don't think he's, a top 10 offensive lineman in the league or the conference or
How
anything
could we
crazy.
know? They don't play him.
He hasn't played, but he seems good. And Josh Nitman, who played really well while Bach was out, is also just
Yeah.
sitting there, just
Yeah.
waiting. And it's like, give one of these guys a chance. Why would Jake Hansen be the answer? And I've seen two solutions proposed: either just put in one of those two guys for Newman at right guard, or move over Jenkins, who again is not playing well this first year back from the major injury. Take some of that movement away, put him inside where we've seen him have success before, and put in Ninman or Tom at right tackle. Either way, do one of those things. And it was just play after play. Somehow, I'm looking at the stats now. Quinnen Williams only ends up with 2 sacks and 2 tackles for loss. He might have 10 pressures after
Yeah.
this game. He was everywhere. And
Everywhere.
I do think
Absolutely everywhere.
very late, it seemed like the Packers picked up protection a little bit, and Rodgers had some time to throw.
Yeah.
But the first 3 quarters, every time they got to third down, the
Yep.
Jets were there. The
Yeah.
Jets were there almost every single time. It was that right interior side of the line, and sometimes it would look like it was Myers, but it's like he's clearly trying to pass someone off to
Mm-hmm.
Newman, who has no idea. I don't remember the last time I've seen one offensive lineman blow up a game plan like he did, like incredibly terrible,
It
and it
was
it blew up the Packers offense on at least half a dozen drives.
They had such lazy stunts getting home, like the Jets defense, where it's just like guys doing the motion coming through, and then wow, there's a lane right to Rodgers, and it's because Royce Newman wasn't just doing anything. There are so many times I rewound the game to look at like how they got home, and it's just Royce Newman double blocking um Myers' guy at the center position, and then just letting his own man go straight through. Like, what are we doing? Like there's no way that's game planned for.
Yeah, it wasn't just bad blocking. It was like a total unawareness of what was
Right.
happening.
Total
Because
unawareness.
there were so many plays where you could tell Myers is like chipping someone and then going to get someone else.
Yep.
And the guy he chips him well. And he's just like, oh, I'll just go through because Newman's either going way over to center or way over to right tackle.
Yep.
It was just inexplicable he looked like a guy who they signed that day.
Yeah.
And
It's
they were like,
100%.
we need you to come in and
We
play
just need you to
snaps.
be
We
a
know
body.
you don't know
Right.
what was happening.
It's inexplicable. But like the solutions is to put your Pro Bowl left guard back at guard.
Yeah.
Like, stop making Elton Jenkins play tackle when he was a Pro Bowler at guard.
And he was not, we've seen him play really well at tackle before the injury.
Right, but
He
like,
was not good at
man.
tackle in this game. A really costly holding on what
Mm-hmm.
would have been the best rushing play of the game. I think it was 22 yards for Aaron Jones.
Yup.
It's like, oh, listen, look at this burst. And we never see it again in the game.
Ever.
And it was crucial to the play. Maybe it would have been less than 22, but it
Oh
still would
yeah.
have been
It would have got like a
a
6 yard
chunk
play.
play. Yeah.
Like the hold that Jenkins had, he very obviously held them, and it prevented the defender from
Yeah.
making the tackle. Like that was
I
the
mean,
reason the play went bigger.
have
But
just blocked him better
could have
too.
blocked the
But
defender too. But like fucking, why would you ask? Why would you want that? But like it just, it's not working. Put
no,
EJ back inside either side. I don't care. And then
I would leave the left side alone because I thought they actually played pretty well.
right.
You didn't see that much come
So
back.
then
I would say leave
right,
that whole leave 5 through 3, or that's baseball, but leave the
right,
left tackle through center alone because I thought they all played fine, but
right.
the right side was a mess.
I saw Bakhtiari play well. I was watching him for a few
Yeah.
snaps. He didn't let any pressures that way. Like some pressures, but not like anything overwhelming.
I think a
Then
blitz got home, but I don't know
right,
if it was entirely his fault. Like it wasn't.
yeah.
There's levels to this, and it was
Take
not.
take Royce out, move
Yeah,
EJ inside, and put Tom at right tackle.
he shouldn't have played in this game after the first quarter. Like it
No.
was so bad, and you could tell. I mean, the Jets clearly realized it, right? And you give credit
Yeah.
to them. We're not going to do that a ton because this is a Packers podcast, and they're not going to see the Jets again this year. But the Jets played well. They have good players. They have impact players, Quinnen Williams, etc. But they knew they were going after Royce Newman the whole game, and
Mm-hmm.
I gotta think, knowing what the Packers' offensive line depth is like, they must have just been giddy, like Josh, to see him out there for this whole game and just continue to beat him up the whole 60 minutes of football.
Right. Like we gave um Zach Tom a cheese week 1 for his fill-in during the Vikings game. Like he did so well when he needed to fill in. He had a efficiency rating on PFF of 97, and he played 30 snaps. So like he had like one bad snap against a probably a lot better Vikings pass rush and like defense. And so why not just give him a chance? If we're gonna be losing in embarrassing fashion like this, make a move that at least hopefully might have some payoff to it. Get Zach Tom some snaps to see if he is something real and can replace EJ at tackle, move EJ back inside, or do anything to fix it. Don't put in Jake Hansen. Like I'm not. It's no offense to Jake Hansen, but like man, he's not gonna be doing much else that Royce Newman's not doing already. Like he's not proven enough to be able to do that, and it's mind-boggling that they're just not trying anything new. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see the same starting five on the offensive line get trotted out next week. But
Yeah, which is sad, but
I've come to not expect changes, which is just the worst feeling. It's like when the Bucks, to bring basketball lesson for a brief moment, go on like their mid-season slide and we're all yelling at Bud to do anything different. Like
yeah,
just do anything that'll make sense as to not be losing games stupidly like this. And then Bud gives us the double birds and goes off and wins a championship that season.
yeah.
But like,
Well, the difference is the NBA plays 82 games
yeah,
and the seeding is less important. The NFL plays 17. I was going to say 16.
yeah,
17. And now this is already 3 losses through 6 games as the Minnesota Vikings, who have a win over Green Bay, sit at 5-1 after beating the Dolphins with no one healthy, but still
yeah.
went and beat the Dolphins,
They
and
did their job,
which they've done pretty much all season.
and
They
the
have
Packers
I
haven't.
forget who, they have an ugly loss to someone,
No, the only
but
losses to the Eagles, the 6-5-0 Eagles.
yeah,
And that I wouldn't call it ugly. They just lost on the road to a really good Eagles team. Like
yeah, it's fair.
that's just their only loss, and that's really their only blemish. They came back and won against the Lions and had like solidarity that way. They just have been a better team. It's
Yeah.
simple.
I just feel like they just execute. I don't know if the like I feel like when I see the Vikings play, I'm never like, oh my God, this is breathtaking stuff.
Yeah,
They just execute. They do the game plan, and which is like for a Kirk Cousins team, exactly what you should do.
yep.
And if you have enough talent, you can win games that way.
The sentiment on the on like Packers Twitter, was pretty much just that the Packers are a poorly coached team, and I would happen to agree with that at this moment. Like it's just they don't execute well enough.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, just the offense all year, it just has not looked like a cohesive unit outside of any, missing Tay or receivers, or I mean, Newman today was a different level, but outside of even offensive line issues in previous weeks, like the game plans have not been cohesive. Outside of like a Christian Watson rush, just everything has felt so hard. Like both of the Jets scores, the
so
rushing
hard.
touchdowns, they just look so easy. It was schemed
Hmm.
up so well. They got their playmakers in space and they just went with the blocks and scored. Almost every Packers drive relies on Rodgers lacing one to a double covered Lazard or
Hmm.
whatever. And it's like, why does this feel so difficult when the Packers have a guy who's seen as like this offensive minded, not just visionary, but gifted young coach?
Yep.
The offense has been pulling teeth in just ways that it feels like it shouldn't have to be. They don't have the most talented group of anything on offense, but they don't have the least talented group of anything either. I think even playmakers, they're toward the bottom, but their guys have made enough plays, even
Right.
if they're not getting open. I know you have a stat for that, but it's felt harder than it has to be.
Right. And going before I get to that stat, going back a second to the offensive line that they're probably going to trot out the same five players again. Matt Lafleur said in his post game press conference that on potential O line changes, everything's on the table. I just don't believe it.
Should have been on the table 12 minutes into this game is
Yeah.
the problem. Like just the stuff he says means nothing
Yep.
because we just don't see
It's
it.
all it's all smoke and mirrors.
You
I
put
said it
in
earlier.
Jake Hansen for a series. Like if everything's on the table, make the change while the points are still being put on the board.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything to say that at 4 p.m. on Sunday.
Nope.
If you want us to believe that, make the change at 1:30 on Sunday, and maybe it can actually help swing a game.
He
Saying
makes.
it now does not help swing a game.
I don't want to like project in what I think his changes were because like he makes changes in games. When Aaron Jones fumbles the ball against Tampa Bay, they go away from the run game. When AJ Dillon fumbles this game, they kind of go away from the run game.
When anything happens in game, they go
When
away
any
from the run game. That's the only
Yeah,
change we'll
that's the only change
see.
they're making. But like the proper course of action here is Royce Newman is getting blown up at right guard. They put in
Yep.
Jake Hansen. Then if that's the move, keep Jake Hansen in. At least there's some rhyme or reason to it. Like, okay, Jake Hansen's in. Royce, you suck today. Like, I'm sorry. Go sit down on the bench. Think about what you've done. And then let Jake Hansen go. And if Jake Hansen sucks, give Royce another opportunity. But Jake Hansen wasn't like this huge thing. He let up 3 sacks on 3 straight plays for a 3-and-out. They just went back to Royce Newman. Like
Yeah.
you can't
It
put him
just
on top.
barely
You can't put Baby in a corner and expect things to change. Like, come on.
they put in a guy who we just don't expect to be very good
Right.
for like a series. And he wasn't I didn't remember him as abjectly terrible, but as you mentioned, it was just so fast. It was hard to see.
Right.
Then they were like, well, Jake Hansen didn't look amazing out there. Let's just put Royce back. Like, what is the point of it's like if Giannis is struggling, we're gonna put in AJ Green for 3 possessions. Didn't make a huge difference. I mean, obviously it's apples and oranges. You'd always
Right.
ride with Giannis. It's a terrible comp, but it just didn't make any sense the way they went about the potential change at offensive line.
It's so much energy of like we've tried nothing. We've tried everything and nothing's working, or the other way. We've tried nothing
Yeah,
and nothing's working. Like
yeah,
whatever. However the adage goes. Excuse me for not being able to remember it, but come on. Just like, oh, it's we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas.
yeah. That's it. Yeah. Between that and the not giving Aaron Jones the ball stuff, and it's just
Yeah.
like what do these any of these words mean? Like, let's see it on Sunday. That's
Right.
all that matters in the NFL.
Like do
Let's
something
see it
this
on
week.
Sunday.
Do something this week in practice that makes it look like you actually cared about changing your game plan. Because right now they just don't. But sort of getting back to everything looking so hard. Like I looked at it, I wasn't sure if it was like receivers just weren't winning routes or anything. And give like this is from Next Gen Stats, which is very nice. The in for separation. So how open a wide receiver is when he's throwing the ball. Alan Lazard is tied for 14th worst amongst qualified receivers in separation at 2.3 yards on average. This is 140 players, and it
That
counts
sounds right.
wide receivers and tight ends because
Yeah.
it's any receiving, it's any pass catcher essentially. And so minimum of 15 targets.
Are there
That
any other Packers on there? Can you
uh,
see?
I did. So the only one I looked at, other one I looked at was Romeo Dobbs because he's like the other impact player we want to see in the passing game. Robert Tonyan, they didn't update it through this week, so I didn't
Yeah.
want to look at that because he had a better week this week than he's had the entire season. So
Yeah.
the other one was Romeo Dobbs. He's at 3.6 yards, which was like middle of the pack.
That
But like,
sounds decent.
so
Yeah.
here's the rub though, is that like Tyreek Hill had about the same amount of separation in um as separation, I think, as Romeo Dobbs. I can look it up quick while I banter. But the problem is that Tyreek Hill is a better receiver than Romeo Dobbs and Allen Lazard. He can
Yep.
make those catches. He can use his speed in different ways that just allow for um, that separation to not matter. And then on the big plays, he runs in a straight line
Way past.
past
Yeah.
everybody and catches the ball
Yeah.
and scores a touchdown. And so he's using his like skills in a different way to where the separation doesn't matter for him. But when they're only using Alan Lazard on slant routes and like post routes and things like that, his separation matters. And I think the reason I looked this up is that on the fourth down play, I think it was, when
Christ.
when Lazard I think dropped it and
Yeah.
they lost it. Sauce Gardner was on Alan Lazard, and it was the hand to hand play where Greg Olson talked about they teach DBs hand to hand, like to break up the ball by swatting the other receiver's hands.
Yep.
That route that Lazard took was lazy. They talk about planting your foot. We saw Devontae do this all the time. Devontae is like the top route runner in the league.
He made
His
Chad Ochocinco cry. His
right,
routes were so crisp.
his cuts mattered. Alan
Yeah.
Lazard took the circuliest, roundest turn on his route. There was no purpose to it. He's like, I'm just gonna run the general direction of that route. There was no foot plant. There was nothing of that, and that's easy for a receiver to cover. You're not changing direction with
For a
purpose.
DB to cover. Yeah.
You're just not changing direction with purpose. It's just
Yeah.
you're running, you're going through the motions instead of making a cut in or a cut out. You're just going about it lazily, and that's where fundamentals and executing matter. But it's also just the caliber wide receiver we're working with. Like, love Al
Yeah.
Lazard. I think he has potential to be a wide receiver one on this team, or obviously is on this team, but to be a purposeful wide receiver one in this league. But it's things like that, and given that's just one play, end of the game, maybe he's
But a
tired.
big play.
But a big play where that
Yeah.
execution needs to happen, and it's just not there.
Yeah, you know who they really miss? A little bit of Sammy Watkins, who it felt like was getting good separation and
Hmm.
run pretty good routes, but I mean, just because of his pure physical attributes, Christian Watson was, when they let him run, he was finding some space. Obviously, the issue was what he was doing with that space. But
Right.
again, another reason that we really need to hope that these receivers can get healthy. And now Randall Cobb, who seemed like he was worried that ankle might have been a serious issue. Then after the game, a little less worried, but we don't have definitive answers on that quite yet.
Yeah,
But
they said that Randall avoided breaking his ankle. X-rays were negative, but he has a potential for a high ankle sprain, and
this could still be a few
has an
weeks.
MRI tomorrow. So he could be
Yeah.
out. If it's a severe high ankle sprain, he could be out possibly the rest of the year. Like
And
it's
we still have at least a couple weeks on Watkins because he was placed
nope,
on.
nope.
Oh no!
This week was his last week, so he can come
Oh,
off. He can come off this coming week for the Commanders game if they want
forgot
him
how
back.
long he's been out.
Yep, it was
He has been.
pre-Bucks game.
Yeah. So hopefully he's able to get back, and hopefully Watson can get healthy. And the issue there, right, is he's still not acclimated as a true
Yep,
wide receiver. I mean, does Amari Rogers now have more catches downfield than Christian Watson?
probably,
Or at least it's
maybe
got to be
close,
really close.
one to
Yeah,
two or
it's maybe
something.
1-2 or 1-1.
I said that
That's
in the
the real
Discord.
issue.
I said that in the
Yeah.
Discord. I said Amari Rogers got targeted downfield more than Christian Watson. I'm sick.
I mean, obviously Watson didn't play in this one, but
Yeah,
since that first drop, it's got to be pretty close. Which, again, you want a guy who's going to get open. Watson has the speed to do that, but they don't trust him to do anything except basically jet sweeps at this. And they've been effective-ish, but
yeah.
that's not helping the
Right.
deep pass game.
Drives me insane. Just
Yeah,
actually up the wall. We saw it. I was so excited when we saw it start with the Vikings game. So excited. It was so heartbreaking to see him drop it when he could have
I
just went for it.
wonder. Like, how much different is the season if he hauls that thing in?
Man, we're going into some we're
I know
getting
you
into
can't
all
do it.
bad
If
territory.
Chris was healthy and everything, if KD was not on the line and everything else, but
If some butts and candy and nuts.
yeah, yeah.
But talk about Rogers a bit. Rogers, in my notes, I'm not entirely serious, but I'm definitely a little serious. It's just Rogers sucks question mark. Like I just don't know. You've talked about it at length on Twitter and then last week with Adam. His deep ball accuracy just isn't there.
No.
And maybe like I know you didn't like the ball he threw to Aaron Jones when Aaron Jones caught it out of
No,
bounds.
I mean, it was a catchable ball, but it was behind him, and Jones had his
Yep.
man beat, and he had to wait up for it, and that's when he got pushed out.
It
And
was a little towards the sideline, which is why he went out of
yeah,
bounds.
and he's not, Randy Moss, right? He's not able to drag both feet in while making that
He,
fight fading backwards
he's
catch. It's a
running
hard
back.
ball to catch. Yeah,
Like Aaron Jones on the wheel route has been a Matt Lafleur staple his
of
entire
course,
tenure,
as it should be.
as it should be. But that doesn't mean you can throw the ball up there like it is prime Randy Moss and expect him to come down with it. He's going to be sort of not so graceful catching the ball down the
Yeah.
sideline because he just doesn't have that sort of technique like any other premium wide receiver does. But the deep ball to Lazard that Lazard misjumped, that was thrown to double coverage and wasn't out in front of him. It's just, man.
Outside of the streak to Lazard that he hauls in, the 35-yarder, the longest completion to anyone was, I think, 16 to Tunyon. And I think one was downfield, but I would probably say like 8 or 9 of the 10 were, I mean, the Jets were basically playing prevent, and
Mm-hmm.
Rodgers just keeps finding him underneath, and then Tunyon scampers around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just not been these big completions downfield.
Nope.
It's a problem with how often they try to do it, especially in some big situations where again we keep seeing third and fourth and short, and either they're throwing post routes if they are in the red zone, which as you mentioned they just really didn't spend any time there because they didn't move the ball in this game,
Right.
or they're just really trying to throw 15, 20 farther yards downfield, and they just cannot do that reliably this season, whether it's the receivers or Rodgers. I think early in the season it was more the former. I
Yep.
think later Rodgers' ball, I don't think he's been terrible. I don't think he sucks, but I think he's just been okay for most of this season. And
Yeah.
you look at pre this game, I think he was 12th among quarterbacks in total PFF grade,
Yeah.
which sounds right. It's not, you're not dealing with, he's better than Zach Wilson in this game, which not saying a lot, but he doesn't look like an MVP guy who's willing them to
Nope.
wins. He
Not
just
anymore.
literally hasn't done that.
Nope.
Yeah.
And Rogers said post game, Bill Huber tweeted this out from the press conference. Um, from Rogers' quote, "When we struggle, it's when we try to do too much." Rogers says, um, and Rogers says he'd like to be more simplistic in the approach on offense. Quote: "The plays that we had were the plays that we had in were executable. Executable. I can't speak today. So this is not an attack on the staff at all, but the execution when it looks like that, it's not good enough." He said the scheme is good. It's really good, and I would happen to disagree. Like they're taking so many like deep shots down the field, but aren't throwing in the middle of the field. Like we saw some plays, and they had positive yardage on these plays where they're throwing crossing and slant routes and getting good chunks of yards, right? But there's so often we see wide receiver screens, just like little uh, negative or throwing it 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage and making the receiver make a move to get yardage. Why not throw it in the middle of the field? We're seeing it work. Like Tunyon had catches in the middle of the field. I think Romeo Dobbs had a catch in the middle of the field, and it's just like, man,
Amari Rogers.
Amari Rogers. Greg Olson said it on the broadcast. Rarely do you see copycat in the game of the NFL work so quickly. But the play that they ran for Amari Rogers when he caught that ball streaking across the middle was the play that the Jets had just run against the Packers that had gotten them yardage. Like it's the reason why the Packers need a game manager over an MVP level quarterback right now. They need to throw the ball to get 5 to 10 yards on their passes rather than hope that 2012 Rodgers walks through that door. 2011 Rodgers walks through that door.
2020 Rogers walks through that, or 2021 Rogers. They're not
Any
getting
of
that either.
right, like it's he's just not the maybe the timing or the relationship or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to blame it on. He just can't make those throws anymore, and they're not getting completed. Maybe he's making them and the receivers aren't catching them, but man, it's just the scheme needs to be make the game simple for Rodgers, especially if this thumb issue that has cropped up is going to be an issue.
Yeah.
He kept saying it's not a problem, it's not a problem, it's not a problem. I couldn't. I could tell you how many wrinkles he has on his damn hands. They were looking at him shaking it out so much on the broadcast. Every shot of Rodgers was him wincing and then shaking his
Yeah.
hand because it probably freaking hurts.
Yeah.
And oh my lord, it was a frustrating day of Packers
So
football.
I disagree with you. They could certainly need MVP quarterback. The issue that the Packers have, and they've had all year, is they have a guy who's playing like he's that guy, but he's not executing like he's that guy. Rodgers continues to throw the balls and, going for insane double coverage down the field when he's got 12 yards of wide open grass in front of him that could be an easy jog forward and slide or go out of bounds and move the chains. But he's trying to zip it on the move downfield or
He did that
in
this
the
game.
double coverage into a tight window, into a 5 foot window or whatever. But the throws aren't there. And he's not bad, but he's not able to hit these pinpoint throws that he's used to hitting. And that's what's killing them, is that he's somewhere in the middle of playing like an MVP, but operating that way and being a game manager. If he just did this Bailey Zappi playbook and handed the ball off a bunch and kicked out and rolled out and play action and hit guys who are running across open on slants, they'd move the ball a lot better. But he's in this awkward place of like, let's go long on third and short. I can hit that
Oh
throw.
my god, the deep
He's
ball
hitting that
on second
throw
and 22 made me so angry.
like
It made
one
me
out of
so
five,
angry.
6 times. I mean, outside of the one to Lazard, I can't really remember a ball that he placed well down the field
No,
that
not
was like, oh my God, did you see that throw? And it's just like you
haven't.
can't you can't do it 8 times a game if you're completing one of them. It's just it's killing drives.
Yep, it's makes my head spin. But yeah, the second and 22 play where they bombed it to Lazard and it's incomplete. Like, yeah, great time to call for a bomb down the field. Like, if you know you're going for it on fourth down, you have to. Why not throw a middle route to get some yards back and then take
Hand
a
the
shot
ball
down the
off.
field or do anything to get
Yeah.
some of that 22 yards back to get a first down? Because then you're hamstrung on third down and then you're hamstrung on fourth down. They're just the process is not good right now. And
Yeah.
I see what you're saying about like the Packers like needing MVP level quarterback. I
I,
agree.
I
Like,
think they need either. The problem is
right.
they're getting neither.
They're getting neither. They're thinking that, or Rodgers thinks he's that level and isn't executing that level, like you had said. You had mentioned that like there's plays where he can like take the ball and run a little bit. I think it was a pass to Tunyon that was incomplete or whatever it was.
I think it was.
Rodgers,
So
I think you know the play I'm talking about.
it
It was
rolled out right.
he rolled out right. It was first and 10, and he had nobody in front of him. He could have gotten 5 6 yards just jogging.
He might have gotten the first down,
Right,
honestly.
there was nobody there, and he threw it at the line of scrimmage. He does that thing where the very Rodgers thing.
You got like your ankles behind it, so it's still legal.
Right, and that where he like pumps like he's gonna throw it to get the linebacker to freeze on
Yep.
whoever he's covering in the middle, and then just runs it like tucks and runs. But instead of pump run, he faked out what me for sure. He pumped, and then passed, and then it fell incomplete. It's like Rodgers, buddy, just run the ball. Like it needs to be simpler for Aaron Rodgers and company for at least the next month. Like they need to get into a rhythm and understand that their offense is making it like clicks when things are simple, like Rodgers is saying. But that falls on him too to make simple passes. We talked about it. I talked about it on the preview pod. I'm not saying calling for Rodgers to be a game managing quarterback because he has more of what I thought talent to be able to do that at his age. But if you're having young wide receivers who are not running routes or getting separation, make the game easier on the team. We've talked about since week one that sort of the narrative this season was going to be the receivers and how they play and the development of Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs. Dobbs has been fine. Watson's been hurt, so we can't really judge Christian Watson for that so much. But you can do so much by getting Romeo Dobbs consistent targets and consistent catches by making a dink and dunk offense sort of work. It doesn't have to be 2 3 yards. It can be 5 6 yards with stuff across the middle. But then you need to commit to actually doing it, and they're not doing it. It's the the shots they're taking and sort of the play calling they're having is on simple drives. It doesn't make a lot of sense almost ever. Like I can't tell you there was a drive this season, at least not in the last couple of weeks, where I'm like, man, what a nice drive. It looked good.
Yeah.
They committed to the run. Their passing plays were executed well. They made sense. I can't think of any time to do it. It's just
It's
like
probably one in the the first half of the Giants game, but the last
maybe
6 quarters of football, there's certainly been none.
no.
Outside of the Bears game, do you know how many yards Aaron Rodgers has rushed for in 5 games outside of that one?
He has rushed for Rodgers has.
Rodgers,
It's gonna be like 8.
-1. One rush for -1 against the Vikings and Bucks. One rush for 1 against New England. None against the Giants. One rush for 0 in this game, and 5 for 10 yards against the Bears. So overall in the year, it's 9 rushes for
They're
9 yards.
so
That's just not been there. So that's, again, he was never Lamar Jackson, but
mm,
clearly a quarterback who could move well and would make some plays with his feet. He just hasn't done that at all this season.
they
And that's a big part when your offense is struggling. I mean, that's something that people talk about NFL wide of if you have a quarterback who can rush a bit, it just raises the floor of the offense because it's so hard to guard downfield, guard the running backs, everything else, and account for that.
that's why
That
Rodgers
dimension just being gone is tough.
that's why Rodgers was so hard to play against when he was in his prime. Is that he would do that? Like I feel like they've stopped bootlegging him out to get him time and space to throw the ball. But like maybe that's just the receivers aren't good enough to make those long plays develop or anything like that.
And the offensive line isn't giving you
Mhm.
time to roll out, which was an
Right,
issue in this game. But it is bizarre to see him, in 5 of the 6 games, just do nothing on the ground.
right. And it's just like, man, it looks like a different Packers team because it is, but it looks like a very different Packers team we saw last year.
Yeah. And I think he's got like only twice as many yards as fumbles, I think now. Like it's just, he's gone
Twice as many
from,
yards as fumbles.
yeah.
What do you?
So he has fumbled 5 times
Who?
and has 9 yards. Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, he's fumbled
Like,
not 5 times this season.
Yep. He hasn't lost them
Jesus.
all, but he has.
Oh,
This is he had 3 coming in and
and he had
lost 2
two
more,
today.
or fumbled twice and lost 1 in this game. Yeah.
Wow, just
So again,
incredible.
he's gone from a guy who could kill you if he was able to roll out to a guy who is not at time, has not hit the deep throws, and
Right,
is more likely to lose the ball when he's holding it than he is to make a positive play on the ground.
right.
Which again, I mean, he's 38. I'm not expecting him to rush for 50 yards a game or
No,
something,
but
but
at least have the threat
even
there.
I mean, I remember like old man Drew Brees would get out every so often, and
Right.
you get the guys going downfield, and that is, I mean, if you are going to run these deep routes, that's what that should be opening up. Is you
Yep.
send in the secondary down the field. If you get a hole, there should be space there. I mean, any quarterback can run for a bit these days.
Yeah. It's it's not good.
Yeah.
According to ESPN stats and info, Rob Demboski tweeted out the Packers have scored 107 points in 6 games this season, 17.8 per game. That's obviously averaged out. According to the ESPN stats and info, that's the fewest in any 6 game span with Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback.
Wow. I
So
believe it.
it's felt that way, and it's indicative of just the play that's happening.
I mean, I can't, and this is going to sound hyperbolic. I legitimately don't think it is. Outside of like severe injury or weather, I can't remember a time in our lifetimes where the Packers struggled to move the ball this much.
You know when they struggled to move this ball this much?
What?
Every Matt Lafleur playoff game.
Okay, fair. I mean, for extended runs in a
No, I
regular
know,
season.
I know, I
I
know, I
mean,
know.
even late stage Favre, when it was like rough, like he was turning the ball over, but at least like they were getting to go down the field a bit. Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. I mean, it has just felt so painful.
Yeah.
And they just, I mean, we say this every week, but they need answers. I mean, we're
Hmm.
mid-season, they're not in a position where they can like be happy with, a plucky 7-8 win team and a solid draft pick. They're supposed to be contending.
Yep.
They're sure not looking like it, but
Absolutely not.
I think the biggest thing that has to happen now, and positive signs, the defense looked great for a lot of this game. The secondary continues to be a strong point.
Yep.
You got to figure out the offensive line, and you just got to get the offense just more functional. Like either Rodgers starts to play better and finds a second win this year, or I think more realistically, they just incorporate a game plan that utilizes what they have better. It just feels like right now they're still game planning for MVP 12 under center and they just don't have it. And
Just
it's
don't have it.
just, and I don't think he's been terrible, but he has not been amazing either. I think he's just been good and they're just not ready for that, it looks like.
Yeah, I would say he has been less than good, but that's just differing opinions.
I mean, I think less than good to his standard. I think league wide.
Yeah,
I mean, the guys we're seeing him face, I think he's been better than most of them outside of Kirk.
I guess. Like he's
Yeah.
you said he is better than Zach Wilson today, and like I'm not saying Zach Wilson balled out and he was good in any way, but
You
like
could argue Daniel Jones was better than him
that's
last
where I was
week, which is
heading.
pretty tough. Yeah.
And like there was nothing today where I was like, man, Aaron Rodgers is outplaying Zach Wilson. To me, they play at the
Yeah.
same level. They used Aaron Rodgers more to the detriment of the Packers. They used Zach Wilson less to the benefit of the Jets.
Yeah.
But they both had the same impact on the game. Like Zach Wilson arguably had more of an impact on the game because he wasn't making the mistakes that Rodgers was doing and giving away drives. The first half, sure. Played out
Yeah, I was gonna
first half,
say he had
sure.
some pretty tough
Second half, second half
yeah,
he did just fine. He was
because he just
leading
handed the
drives.
ball off. I mean,
I
I think if we
sure,
were,
but
I think if we were doing a Jets pod, we'd be less up on how Zach. I think the first half he was a
right.
disaster. The second half they just moved him out of the way for the most part, which is not great quarterback play. That's just like a coach who's more able to say, Zach, you're not
He
it, you're not it, buddy.
he threw as many good deep balls as Aaron Rodgers today.
I think he threw one less. I think Rodgers threw one. I don't think Wilson threw any.
The
Like the
one
Corey Davis ball was not good.
40 yards is still 40 yards. Like it's still a completed pass. That
It,
you can't tell me that
I'll
the
say
Corey
it's
Davis
tied.
ball.
I'll give you tied.
You can't say that the Corey Davis ball wasn't any more lucky than the Lazard ball.
No, the Lazard ball, he placed it. That's the thing. He did what he thinks he can do every throw on that ball. That
Right.
was
Into double
beautiful ball.
coverage.
Yeah, but he laced it in the right spot. The Corey Davis, like a good secondary play, breaks that up. Like there was nothing
Yeah.
that could be done about the Lazard ball. I mean, it had to be a great catch, but it was in the perfect spot. The Corey Davis ball was like throw it up. Corey Davis gets to it. Eric Stokes doesn't, and
Yeah.
that's the play. I think it is different, but I do see your point.
Yeah. All right. It's been horrendous. Do we have anything else? I have one one more thing that or two more things I want to touch on just before we get out of here.
I know I teased about some stats, but I think I did get to them all.
Okay. Did you pull up the ones
Oh,
that you had pulled up? The tweet?
I don't remember having a tweet pulled up.
Alrighty, fair enough. Ryan Wood, as of a minute ago, which is indicative of just how the game went. You pretty much distill the game down to this. Aaron Rodgers was sacked 4 times and hit 9 times. The first time it's happened since the Week 6 of 2020 at the Bucks when they got demolished.
Vita Vea.
Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon combined for 60 yards on 19 carries, only the second time since the start of last season they've been held to 60 yards. The Jets completely dominated the Packers O-line. That's from Ryan Wood. And that's the story of the game. That's all there is to it. But then Peter Bukowski said, what's the 11th? Last week, Monday? Or no, last week, Tuesday. Aaron Rodgers is playing like a quarterback who publicly feuded with his team, choked in the playoffs before mulling retirement, didn't believe he could help the team by coming to spring ball, then spent the summer doing more podcasts than me, Peter Bukowski. But no, I can't figure out why the Packers suck either. And it's like, it's a lot to project onto Aaron Rodgers, but
Yeah.
it's a thread in the tapestry of what's going wrong with the Packers this season.
Yeah, it's been multifaceted. I mean, I think there's very few that you feel like truly great about.
No. And that's
Which is a bummer because again, I do think this is a good team when everything is aligned correctly, and we just haven't seen that at all consistently. Like offense, defense, whatever. Like they clearly could use some playmakers, and we're gonna keep hearing about Odell Beckham Jr. Clearly, that was brought up on the broadcast a
man.
couple of times. I mean, look, would I be opposed to that? No. But also, like, do I think Odell signing with Green Bay is going to fix all the issues in the pass game? Absolutely not.
No, Rodgers still needs to hit him. They still need to throw.
It's
They
need
still
enough time for him to get the ball downfield.
not time.
And it could almost be worse if they, oh, we got Odell, let's throw even more. No, hand the ball off.
Yep.
Get your best five group of offensive linemen. And this is, Sternberger being promoted seems like it may be hurting the team more than helping the team at this point. But get your best five group of offensive linemen and get them ready. Or Sternovich. Sternberger's the former Packers
The
tight
tight
end,
end.
right?
Yeah.
Sternovich or Stenovich, whichever it is. Yeah,
Adam
Stenovich.
Stenavich.
Cross them over there. But get your best group of five offensive linemen and figure out the protection. Because, I mean, we know the game starts in the trenches, and the defense has seen that so many times in the last couple of weeks. But run the ball a lot and then use that to build out the passing game. And whether you got Odell Beckham or, DeGuara back there, doesn't really matter if you're not doing things the right way with the way Rodgers and guys have been playing.
Right. And it's the matter of the fact is that they can sign Odell if they really want to. I would be shocked if they did because it goes against everything the Packers just stand for, essentially. Because why would you add talent during the season?
That Amari Rodgers spot, man. Or that Amari Rodgers roster spot, man.
Dude, it's. Oh. But the point being that if they sign Odell, they still have to scheme Odell into the offense. And I don't care to have Odell on the field if they're going to keep with the offense that they're doing right now. It just
Exactly.
They still need to utilize him to Odell's best ability, and they just don't. I don't see them doing that.
I kind of want to see more Amari Rodgers offensive sets.
If he's gonna catch the ball for a couple,
he ran
yards,
a good route, got open,
not?
He caught it. I was honestly pretty disappointed that they never. That was his only target. Like,
yeah.
I don't.
It was
get,
late in the game too.
It late-ish. I think it was third quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, it was when they're trying to mount a comeback. Like, I just think you got a guy who gets out there and makes a play. Lazard has his hands full with Sauce Gardner out there, and Dobbs was kind of bottled up too. Like, I just don't get why you don't go, stay out there. Go make another play. Like,
another play.
We're in desperation mode here.
Keep the hot hand.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's entirely just frustrating.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. That was hardly as cathartic as I needed it to be. Following.
I feel better.
I don't feel better. I feel worse that we keep having to talk about the same thing over and over and over and over.
I feel better because I'm thinking about Marjon Beauchamp now, so maybe that's why I feel better.
Maybe. But to move on a little bit, next week Commanders. We're not going to do a preview of that. So, well, we are going to do a preview of that. We're not going to preview it now. We'll be back on Thursday to talk about the Commanders and hopefully
get ready for the commies.
Stop the skid that they got going on. However, before we leave today, we have a new review. Crazy Ferguson decided to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. So like Crazy Ferguson here, you can have your review read out. And this is what Crazy Ferguson had to say. Subject line TOTT, just Taco Tundra. I can't believe I'm going to read all this. This little thought. I clicked off of it. Oopsie daisies. We'll restart. This little thought of a podcast makes me feel so wildebeest in my breezy jeans. Numac's voice has an uncanny resemblance to that of Al Roker. Sometimes I feel like aliens are able to read my thoughts, but then I think it's not aliens. It's just Al Roker's vocal doppelganger, Numac, and he has special abilities that he has harnessed during his time playing jazz piano in secret. Wink, wink. In a secret, wink, wink, society where people put on animal masks and tickle each other gently with feathers. Anywho, great content about the Packers. I'll take any chance to hear Ty Winnish talk even more. Hey. He's actually a very funny man, despite what Al Roker says about him. Maybe Ty will sell me a slab of good goat meat and we can tempt Rohan to get off his vegetarian diet. Rohan catching a stray. That reminds me, does Numac eat goat? It's important to know this. I'm planning a picnic. I'd like to invite everyone from the podcast because I have a feeling we will all be friends one day. There's no better way to start a friendship than going on a goat meat picnic together. Since Numac is making fat sacks of cash doing this podcast, he can pay for the picnic. Thanks for the treat. Thanks for the content, and most of all, thanks for reading this live on your podcast. I love hearing you guys read my written word vomit.
The second time, I believe, where this Crazy Ferguson, this reviewer, like drops in a little Tywinish compliment and then also slides in that I'm just a butcher in this world. In this headcanon he has of all of us. I sell the meats that he procures to hang out with the rest of you. And I'll take it. I'll take it. That's fine.
This man is a wordsmith.
Man or woman? I
Man
suppose
or
we don't
woman,
know.
I
This
suppose. This
person.
person is a
Yeah.
wordsmith. An
Yeah.
eloquent wordsmith, I will not say, but a
No.
wordsmith nonetheless.
Yeah.
So thank you, Crazy Ferguson, for your wonderful review and comments. It made the end of the pod a little better, maybe feel little bit greater coming out
I
of
feel
the
like
coming out of this tough loss.
gotta go full Bill Simmons. These are my readers. These are our listeners. This is
Psychos,
it.
psychos,
Yeah. Sickos like us.
psychos. Same thing. We're both
Yeah.
in that group. So, alrighty, everybody. Bucks start this week. Go check out the non-Bucks East over under pod over on the GSPN Eurostep feed. Should be a good one. And the Bucks, I think, open, correct me if I'm wrong, against the Sixers.
Thursday night, TNT.
Yep, against Joel Embiid, uh, Rick Ross, Brick Harden. I forget what his nickname was last year, but it was good. James Harden and who else is on that team now? Ooh, PJ Tucker.
Tyrese Maxey, PJ
PJ
Tucker. Yeah,
Tucker
old friend.
in Milwaukee.
Ooh. Honestly, I think yes.
I think so too. But go check out all the good things you have going on GSPN.
Nope, we're wrong. In Philly.
In Philly. So
Yeah.
you can get all your GSPN info at gspn.info. Go fill out the Discord form, get in there with the review, screenshot of a 5-star review, just like Crazy Ferguson did. Um, other than that, we'll be back with you guys for a preview pod of the Commanders on Thursday. So, Ty, thank you for joining me today, buddy.
Numac, thank you for having me.